today. We've started these training sessions, gosh, almost 2 years now. And what we like to do is really kind of give an overview, not only what some of the VOAD members are doing and some of our partners. So we also want to make sure people kind of get a glimpse of what VOAD does behind the scenes. And today we're going to talk about lessons learned from Maine VOAD responses. And then we're going to, part of it be really an interview that I'll be doing with some of those key players on it. And again, many hands make work a lot easier. And that's one thing I think is really important to think about. So it's important to recognize what's going on. Next month, we have the Southern Baptist Disaster Relief. We'll be presenting on their organization. And just like we've done in the past with the Red Cross, Salvation Army, other partners, we want to continue to profile so everybody knows what Maine VOAD's all about. And I think we'll see a really good presentation next month. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. I'm going to turn my camera on because I want to make sure I can see what people can see. But today we're going to have Sam Mishu and Phyllis Rand and Kelsey Preeks talk a little bit about the responses of Maine VOAD. And hopefully Phyllis will make it. I know she's coming. Oh, there she is. And what we're going to do is kind of talk about, the last year has been a very busy year. And even at this time last year, we were really nervous about hurricanes, tropical weather. We had Hurricane Lee. Just for everyone's information, currently there's only one tropical formation that's out in the Atlantic, but it looks like it's going to fizzle Gordon. Right now, there's nothing showing in Africa like we'd normally see at this time. So our hurricane season, anything was predicted, you could probably throw out the window, but we still aren't out of the woods. So we'll continue to monitor that and we'll update you as things change. But again, last year, this last 12 months has been a very busy time. Since I've been involved with VOAD, it's never been as busy it has been here as the rest of our state. Just to give you an idea, state of Maine right now is working on 12 distant disasters. And a lot of times people don't realize it's not just the event, but the recovery efforts. So with that, we felt it was really important to talk a little bit about what Maine VOAD did and their role and the responses. So we're going to do it in two parts. The first part is going to talk a little bit about the Lewiston shooting that occurred on October 25th. And just for reference point, this is something that you never want to have in your community. I know in my career, I've faced two different mass casualty situations involving an active shooter and never thought I'd see what I've seen. But I think the one thing that's really important, it takes a community to come together, and Maine VOAD did play a role in that response. Well, we're not going to go into details about who did what and where as far as the investigation and stuff like that, but just for your awareness, I think it's really important to give you an overview of how Maine VOAD did get involved in some of the challenges, but also the opportunities that occurred with that. Then the second phase, we're going to talk a little bit about the December and January storms. And I'm also going to incorporate some information from Kelsey Preeks, who was involved in the individual assistance recovery efforts. So we really have a good presentation for you today. We won't be doing a big PowerPoint presentation, but really kind of hear it from the voices that were involved deeply with it. So with that, I'm going to introduce Sam Mishu, our VOAD co-chair, as well as Phyllis Rand. And I'm going to start with Sam. Talk a little bit about Maine VOAD's role in the response and recovery efforts in the Lewiston shooting incident.
Sure. Bill, thanks for putting this on again. You're amazing. So the VOAD response for the active shooting situation was kind of unique. Of course, we've never had to experience that, and hopefully we never have to again. But the first thing that Maine VOAD members realized is we were all impacted by this disaster. And then the second thing we all committed to was staying informed and keeping an eye on each other. But we knew very early on it was going to be important for us to try to limit the amount of people that just immediately go into the scenes and respond. So that was our very early thought process as a board and as a group. Um, we waited until we were requested, and we took information and some phone calls from some of our partners, and just even though we didn't have any information, we shared that we didn't have information. We just shared the truth. So really, our role in this particular response was to kind of be an organizer of things, information, help, and resources as necessary, and just we paused for specific requests to come through that we could disseminate amongst the partners.
Phyllis, do you have anything to add?
I think we also, along with Sam was saying early on, it wasn't just Sam and me. We got our board involved. We had meetings on a regular basis so that we could each know what was going on. And we also, were working very closely with Maine Emergency Management Agency for that collaboration and communication that we needed to do for this event.
Yeah, on the outset, I think you both described really clearly what VOAD's role was. As mentioned, Sam mentioned, there was some waiting. There was a point of waiting just until Maine VOAD was requested. So let's talk a little bit about that, Sam and Phyllis, and who actually requested Maine VOAD to get involved in the response and recovery efforts.
Phyllis, you want to go first?
Well, Maine Emergency Management Agency is the one who activates Maine VOAD. And so that's what needed to happen. It's like Sam said, we don't rush in there and start emailing people. We had to be requested first. And we were requested from Maine Emergency Management Agency. Of course, we were talking amongst ourselves as well. But it's always that's part of our activation, is being notified by the state.
Yeah, and let me kind of provide a little bit more on that as well. Again, we just don't rush in. Nobody self-deploys, but the one thing that was critical on this was the relationship between the county emergency management and Maine emergency management, and actually it was a county emergency management that did request VOAD through the state. And let's talk a little bit about Phyllis and Sam. You were both involved, and we'll kind of tie into the response and recovery, but you were both involved with that relationship and that communication.
Yeah, so after we received that initial request, that call, thankfully Phyllis was able to kind of mobilize and move into the EOC at Androscoggin County Emergency Management Agency. And, in this type of response early on, there wasn't a whole lot we could do. There were some phone numbers and contacts, and if anything, we collectively brought a calm into the EOC there. We listened to others that were coming into the room, and we didn't do a million things there. We did have a lot of great conversations, but that was our role early on during this activation.
Yeah, Phyllis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the nice thing about being in the Androscoggin County Emergency Operations Center was they have all this nice technologies to connect us with our other board members. And also, Bill Gwenda ended up at the Androscoggin County Emergency Operations Center. But because the shootings happened in Androscoggin County. We were right there with the Androscoggin County Emergency Management Agency director. So we were all in the same room, and that was invaluable for um, getting information on uh, what what resources were coming in and going out, not through VOAD, but through the county and the state. And it was just a really good opportunity to communicate with the emergency director and also our board members.
Yeah, one thing that was unique to this situation, not only did we have um, the actual recovery efforts, around still ongoing, search for the gunman, but we also had the recovery efforts that were underway really quickly. But we also had, the idea that have a presidential visit. And again, VOAD's president, the Emergency Operations Center, made a big difference, just having those resources available. Um, one of the things looking at Maine VOAD's role, let's, Sam and Phyllis, your thoughts on some of the challenges that were faced during the response and recovery effort.
Getting
Yeah, some
people.
of the challenges. Oh, sorry,
Oops.
Phyllis, go for it. Go
I
ahead.
think the main challenge I think was to get people to pump the brakes, get the potential responders to pump the brakes, and really let's communicate with those agencies and uh, organizations because in a disaster or an event like this, people want to rush in, and that was one of the hardest things for us was getting people to slow down, but also hearing about people who have self-deployed, hearing about organizations that have self-deployed, and we don't have any communication with them, so we don't know what they're doing. Um, that was tough.
Yeah, yeah. Sam.
Yeah, I'll add. I know when they were setting up the Victim and Family Reunification Center, there was really no, um, the community itself, really moved forward with setting that up, and it was really kind of there wasn't really anything asked of us. It just felt kind of weird. We had no idea what was going on or if anything was necessary. Um, the other thing that I think was a little bit of a challenge for us, and we're still learning and figuring this out, is the state police have contracts with other entities and some of our partners, and some of our partners are really good at responding. And sometimes when they respond, they're in the field doing things, and we're not as well connected trying to see or figure out what's going on with those partners or what's necessary. Um, I think the other challenge is this is such a passionate event. I can't explain it. I can kind of relive it. It's pretty hard to just explain it virtually without experiencing it, but um, all of the community's emotions are pouring through every single phone call and email that's going out, and um, everyone in the community just wants to get to the scene and help out, and they're talking about different fundraisers and just massive amounts of things they want to do. Um, I think the biggest challenge for me for this particular situation, it was actually my hometown. And one of the things earlier on too that we committed as a board was we're talking about helping a lot of other people. We need to help each other as well and make sure we keep an eye on each other. This is very close to home for most of us.
Yeah.
And we were offered assistance and support just as much as anybody else was offered assistance and support. So it's really nice to have some of our partners step in and offer, hey, if you need to talk to anybody, here's these, we have people available or any emotional support. But those were some of the most challenging things with this particular response.
Yeah, you showed up some very, just trying to get people to coordinate, collaborate together, everybody have good intentions. One of the things I did want to point out, and Sam and Phyllis, you were involved in, we have Nikki on here for 211, was vetting that information, what was appropriate, what sources and stuff. And you want to talk a little bit how we work with 211 on that?
Sure. 211 has an MOU, and Nikki, if I'm wrong, feel free to just raise your hand or chime in. I know you're on here. But 211 has an agreement and arrangement with the state of Maine to collect and also disseminate some information. Um, we always like to point people to that direction because they're almost always one of the first groups that have information to disseminate. Um, that kind of leads me to another thing that I realized was a challenge, and this happens a lot too. Um, but so talking about dissemination of information, when when we start telling people to go to other locations for information that they're not normally accustomed to go to, and people that are putting that information up, let's say they put it on their websites, aren't used to doing this type of updating or providing information and important critical information for people in a time of need. It gets super messy telling people where to go and what information to get, and it gets even harder to keep up with keeping things current. So, another challenge that, and one of the things that 211 does for us is when people need to report things or they need to find assistance, it's super easy to refer people to a very consistent group out there, and 211 does that for the whole state of Maine. Um, at some point during the disaster, there were other community members, the city of Auburn, city of Lewiston, the state police, news and media outlets were all posting different types of information. And then the governor started posting information as well. And, they're all trying to do the right thing, but what it does is it creates a little bit more confusion in an already chaotic period of time. Um, so that's my take and spiel on how the information gets out there and what gets out there. So if I could share something with anyone on the call, what's super helpful is to find the right resource and just share that resource instead of creating a whole new resource page on your own. And just say, hey, for information, if you want information about what's going on, refer them to whatever site. It can be the Maine Emergency Management site. It can be refer them to 211 for help. But don't yourself, your organization is better suited to not recreate that type of information and post it on your own sites, because they oftentimes will prove outdated pretty quickly, and it becomes a frustration for survivors and victims and things of that sort. So again, if the state police, a great example is the state police posted that the victims are able to pick up their vehicles. Um, that would be a quick share of that information, but it's not recreating it on a separate page somewhere or telling people to go to another page to find that information. It's about disseminating, not recreating or sending people looking for things.
Well, the other thing, and along those same lines, we also had concerns about, what information has been vetted. What information that are people posting that has been confirmed to be true. So, there were those concerns, people trying to help, but did you really do you really know that, store XYZ is accepting donations? Or if someone called and said they were a psychologist and wanted to help, okay, well, there needs to be some vetting done. Maine VOAD doesn't do the vetting, but we know how to contact the agencies that do that sort of thing. So those were constant things as well. Those were challenges. Again, people mean well, but in this kind of incident and in a disaster, you always have to vet information before you begin to share it. Otherwise, it can come back on you for giving out false information.
Yeah, very good point. That vetting, as you shared, vetting is critical because it can cause more chaos in the midst of chaos. One of the challenges I know we have talked previously, but I think it's important to think about is, there's a lot of people wanting to help. I know early on, Sam and Phyllis, you were in contact with National VOAD. Let's talk about the challenges faced when many VOAD partners from across the country wanted to help. I think that's important people to share. Their intentions are good, but talk about that and how it affected things.
Yeah, it's one thing for somebody to send well wishes, thinking of you. It's another thing to receive phone calls that consume time in a very busy and chaotic time. I always try to share, like, if a specific state is impacted, limit which organizations or who reaches out, or um, it just makes it's one more task that you end up having to do. So we did receive a lot of phone calls from a lot of different parts of the country, um, and they all had similar questions. How can I help? What can I do? And the answer was, I don't know. I'll let you know if we need anything, and we'll publicly post it. We'll reach out to the group. We'll send it out to the group, if we need anything. And that was the same answer the question I answered, quite a bit, quite a few times throughout that
Mhm.
whole several week period of time. And so it it does take a lot of time for entities, to respond to those calls. Know that we appreciate all of our partners. We know everybody's ready to support. It's not meant to be, um, if anyone on the call did call us, we really appreciate you, but it definitely becomes a lot more work that you have to do and navigate during a really busy, hectic time. So, um, I think during that initial, just an example, that initial call, I think, after the day, during the day of the shooting, I was up until about 6 a.m. and then took a cat nap, and then we started back at it with just the questions and the emails and the conversations and the dialogue of what to do, how to do it, the correspondence to things that came up. So it was really, really tiring pretty quickly, um, for those types of, reach outs. So we always say,
Yeah.
if we need something, we'll be the first to let you know. We are not bashful.
Yeah, and I think what you're pointing out too is Maine's pretty unique in that those we talked about this before, but the rules of engagement, you have to kind of be invited in, and that's really what's critical on this. Maine VOAD was invited in by the county EMA, and that may not always be the case. So, it's important for people to understand. Not other states do that. I think it's just important that there's always going to be challenges, a lot of unknowns. Phyllis, anything to add?
No, that pretty much summed it up. And again, we don't want to come across like, um, you know, we're kind of snooty about the whole thing. It's just it's just managing the incident is what we were doing, and we were trying to do it um, in a thoughtful and well conceived manner. And again, we're not shy about asking for help.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I want to kind of be in on the sideline to comment about the leadership of VOAD is they really took things from we know things are going on now, but what's the long-term needs and the importance? But the key element, what are the families and survivors? What do they need? Making sure they are a priority. It's easy to, people coming from all walks of life wanting to do things, but really what's important, you know, give, give permission for those that are impacted directly to grieve. So again, there's no book on this. There may be talking about books, but it really comes down to, being available. A lot of it involves listening. So let's talk about opportunities. There was some really good opportunities that came up um, during this, and I want to share kind of a prompt as Sam. Let's talk a little bit about the issue regarding supply chain and how VOAD got involved to your role.
Oh, supply chain. Can you remind me what we did for supply chain, Bill?
That had to do with all the stores were closed, pharmacies were
Ah,
closed,
yeah,
people. Yeah, yeah.
gotcha. I know where you're directing it. So, yeah, another challenge that we had to navigate, and most of you know that we volunteer for Maine VOAD. We also have other careers and jobs that we do full time. My particular job is the disaster, the director for disaster and things like that for the food bank as well. And the first thing that we knew is there was so much uncertainty the first night that nobody wanted to come to work. So we said, okay, let's not come to work. We rescheduled every single order, every delivery, every pickup. It was an overnight mountain of work that we accomplished. And then and then they couldn't find the shooter. And then there was some uncertainty on whether staff wanted to go to work or not. One thing there was a difference. There was probably a split. Some staff wanted to go to work, some staff weren't comfortable. And then so we were already leaning towards how do we get back up and running again? We closed for one day. We want to comfortably and safely get people back to work. It's a shelter in place. It's not a lockdown. We can come to work. So we started consulting with I asked a couple of questions. I talked to the Androscoggin County EMA director and asked if they were comfortable with us running our trucks through Androscoggin County. But we fielded that question through Bill. He was right close during that first call, and we didn't want to overburden the director at the time. And so we got the question asked, and he responded, "Yep, sure. You fall within all of everything you need to fall in. You are an essential service." And then we got that word back, and we started working almost immediately. We brought crews in on Saturday. We did a lot of work over the weekend, and come the following Monday, we were back fully operational and caught up. That was a big challenge. We started getting phone calls from the Walmart distribution center. They had hundreds and hundreds of trucks that were waiting to be offloaded. So some of them, it was perishable product. They were going to lose it. They wanted to send some products our way. And then, it was just mass chaos with the supply chain world. And so we had to navigate that as well. But we got through it pretty quickly. And I think the first day we did the right thing for staff. We wanted to make sure we got people out of harm's way. There was so much uncertainty of what was going on because of the media information. We needed a little bit more time, and our staff would have started less than 7 hours after the event occurred. Our staff would have already been driving in to come to work, and we just didn't have any information to do otherwise. So we did a pause, and then we hurried up and we started meeting as a team here. We activated our internal team here and really started to work towards getting the stuff up and running again.
Yeah, I think the thing that I really felt was neat was the opportunity that relationships through VOAD. We even had the Maine food producers and grocers get involved in the situation. So we actually had a funnel to help communities, which VOAD is there to do. So I commend you on your efforts. We talked about the opportunities. For both of you, what do you think was the key takeaways as far as opportunities to Maine VOAD on this response and recovery efforts?
So I keep getting kicked off my, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can, Phyllis.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I keep getting kicked off. So I'll go first before I get kicked off again.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the biggest opportunity was getting to know more volunteer partners and adding them to Maine VOAD. And they've been a valuable resource during the storms that we've had since then. Also, I think for me, it was the knowing that we could do this, that we could work out this response as Maine VOAD, because we hadn't been challenged like this before.
Very good. Sam.
I think that's really accurate. It was in times of blue skies, you tend to have people that, well, I'm not going to go to this meeting today, or I don't need to go to that. We're not doing much. It's not exciting. It's not a headline, and so there's less attendance to things. That said, I don't wish any disaster on any community, but it does draw people back to the table to say, how can I help? And since then, we've added more members than I believe we've had in a long time. It's still hard to find volunteers, but we've built a lot of depth, and we found some volunteers that I don't think we would have found in blue skies. It's a lot harder to find volunteers during blue skies to do this work. So,
Great. I think both of you have kind of shared this, but if you would say, what are the best takeaways that you learned through this response and recovery? You have anything that you'd share?
I have one. I think as an organization here, I think for any organization out there, as soon as we paused on what we were doing, um, we paused about a day before we really started coming up with our game plan about talking about how long we were going to pause. I don't think that's terrible, but I think maybe when we paused, I may have introduced, we're going to pause today. What does restarting look like? And I would have started that conversation a little bit sooner. But in the end, there's not really any perfect way to do this. My other takeaway is we need to continue to work with our national partners a lot closer. They're very robust, but we had a lot of them reach in and reach out during that initial response period of time. So I'd say we'll continue to work on working with national partners and building relations with people.
Phyllis.
I think, again, vetting information, all information, not just, not just when people contact us and say they want to be, a counselor at the resource center, like that, but just making sure that we're doing our due diligence so that we can, gain and maintain the respect of the county emergency management agency directors, as well as fellow VOAD members.
Great. Thank you both. Well, we've kind of run through some questions there. I'm going to open the floor real briefly. We still have some more to discuss on the December January storm, but I'd like to open the floor. Any questions for Phyllis or Sam?
F crew.
Okay, well, we'll go on to the next one. Hopefully there may be some questions later. You guys did a great job there. Let's talk a little bit December storm, kind of get background. Maine has had the last year prior to this fall. It's a little different this year. We'd experienced 3 years of drought, very unusual conditions. We started to see severe impacts, post-COVID and some of the challenges with harvests and stuff like that. We faced some very unusual weather storms and patterns coming in. December of 2023, we had a storm come into our state with primary impacts in Oxford County, with other counties impacted as far as Androscoggin, Somerset. We even had areas of northern Maine impacted. To kind of give you an idea, just kind of for those that weren't around, is the southern states seem to be very severely impacted by flooding, very unprecedented flooding, and then the northern part by high winds. So let's talk a little bit about this. We're not going to go in depth to the January storm because Maine VOAD really wasn't as involved. It was a different type, different type of flooding. Not saying that there wasn't attempts, but they were involved as far as keeping information in the loop what was going on. So I kind of want to start with Sam and Phyllis. Let's talk a little bit about Maine VOAD's role in the response and recovery efforts.
Sure. So the December storms were very evident. The impact was pretty clear to see, and we learned from the active shooter situation in October the importance of information sharing and continued communication. So early on, our role quickly became we're aware of the impact. We're meeting with Maine emergency management team. We're talking about what the impact is. And then we moved into a request for support mode pretty quickly. We posted some meetings that were very well attended, both statewide and nationally, and lots of offers for assistance. And in this particular case, we did have a partner that had a lot of experience with a region, and that partner was specifically requested to do some assisting, to bring in some crews. So we organized a lot of data. We one of the other things that we knew was kind of hard to do was the way the intake of information occurs, and to be able to provide access to our responding partners and also maintain visibility. There's no system that works when the state is not in active EOC. So we partnered with another one of our national partners called Crisis Cleanup to start gathering information, and we did that by asking for warm handoff from 211, who was already the point person for who to call. We did not want to disrupt that flow of data. That was pretty important information they were gleaning. So what we wanted to do is try to capture it after they reported the things the state needed. And then once the state was kind of done pulling that information, we were able to kind of pepper that information out and try to collect even more information. We didn't get a whole lot more, but we did get, I believe it was over 100 muck out cleanup type disaster reports, tree cleanups, things like that, that we were able to disseminate amongst our responding partners. That was kind of, I think, our role.
Yeah, Phyllis, do you have anything to add?
Just that crisis cleanup was a new VOAD partner that we were really happy to have, and now we know that their capabilities. It was really a good partnership going on there.
Yeah. Now, you kind of alluded, Sam, to the idea that one of our partners, the VOAD partners, was specifically requested. I want to give a little background before we get into who requested, but keep everybody's, it seems like it was just yesterday, but the one thing that was unique to the situation is the impact areas. There were two different areas of the state impacted, but different pockets. And one of the challenges that was faced was the time of year, which we know December is not necessarily very warm, but we also had road access issues, which complicated getting to certain areas. So, when you have a flood, it doesn't just necessarily go away, but you have issues with trees and things down, roads blocked, roads vanished. But, let's talk about that initial request for Maine VOAD to get involved.
Yeah, so I knew, based on the Oxford County EMA director's request, we met and talked about what they needed, and they had a lot of folks in their community that experienced significant damage and flooding. So I knew early on we needed to figure out very specifically who, and also how do we track that and make sure that we're getting to all these locations, and what does the work look like, so we know how many cases are out there, and maybe if we need to call, more than one partner or 6 partners. So we implemented crisis cleanup. We started getting data in there, and we started almost pretty quickly. The data started filling up in there. I spent an entire night catching up the data from Oxford County reports, putting that into crisis cleanup manually before we could just kind of flow it through 211. And the call center shortly after. Once we had that in there, they could sign up for accounts. So in this case, Southern Baptist was the first to go in. They signed up for an account. They can visually go in there and see the victim contact information and what is needed, and start bringing in crews that can do that type of work. So they also went in and verified some of this information. Some of it was reported as a complete loss. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it just needed a muck out, clean out. So there were some cleaning up things that they did early on with the data. And then after we really started rolling, we were monitoring the data. It was kind of a constant, I don't know, I wouldn't say constant. We constantly, constant's the right word. We had to continually ask folks to just, hey, can you update that information so we know where you're at, who's been responded to, so that we have a pulse for if we need more help, or so we set up some early conversations with them as well to kind of get updates from them. Initially, we did find that to be a little bit of a challenge. They didn't have phone lines set up there. There were a lot of communication challenges in that region. So cell phone was spotty. They had to go to specific areas to be able to make calls or receive calls. But that's what the start of the recovery efforts looked like.
Phyllis, anything to add to that?
No, but I think that it's kind of the nature of VOAT that not every incident is going to require the same things, so
Yeah.
and the same focus. So the cleaning up was our our main focus, and keeping our eyes on that.
Yeah, I think you both pointed the idea of that situational awareness is really critical. One of the things I think for everybody is that, Maine VOAD doesn't physically necessarily go into a community or go out and start mucking out, clean out whatever's needed. It's really that coordination point, working in partnership with our partners out there and leadership in Maine VOAD, and really keeping a monitoring where the needs are. Um, Kelsey Preeks is our state assistant officer. Actually, she got to go through an open fire hose for her first disaster. And Kelsey, you were involved in some of the discussions regarding Maine VOAD and some of the response and recovery efforts. Do you have anything to add?
Sure. A unique challenge that I think we have in Maine that, I'm sure other states have, but it's unique to Maine in the sense that we are the most rural state in the country, is that there were some areas, people who were affected that it didn't make sense for our VOAD partners to go because they were so secluded. So like the resources and time and effort it would take to actually get to them wasn't something that they felt they had the capacity to deal with. So that, highlighted some roles that maybe we could fill. Bill and I were working on CERT teams, and we think a semi more local approach in that way could be really beneficial to situations such as that. Some other things that were interesting about this disaster is that as time went on, like different challenges presented themselves. We had sort of the immediate, like, oh, there's a tree down and now this road is blocked and there's flooding and these people can't be in their homes anymore. So like there's that immediate need for sheltering and getting people out of the elements. But then there were a lot of people who were without power for some places 10, 14 days. I know I didn't have power for 6 days. And so that became a problem in the future because they might not have had a heating source, and a lot of people lost food. So like the immediate needs sort of changed as time went on, just based on how different agencies were able to respond. I know CMP had hundreds of thousands of people, working around the clock, but it just came down to, like there were just some places that didn't get power for a while. So the needs changed as things went through. And so that just meant different asks from our partners. The event happened and then we were still having different challenges and different response needs. As time went on, they changed a little bit.
Yeah, Kelsey, I think it'd be really important. We talk often the idea of that first 24 to 72 hours, and I think there was a good example that it really was up to the local resources, and they did become exhausted in different areas of the state to come into play before others from the outside could even get there. That made a big difference. I know one of the challenges we had was the idea of the flights coming in for some of the national VOAD resources, like even Team Rubicon or Southern Baptist, they weren't able to get resources in because the flights were canceled, the weather was bad. So, and then also too, the idea that we're dealing with winter, which is a little tough to get people to camp out. So yeah, it was a unique. Any other thoughts on other challenges or roles with Maine VOAD during this that either of you have?
Yeah, just a couple things. And I could go on and on about this one. I learned a lot and I saw a lot. But with Southern Baptist, they actually had to bring in their own shelter. So they had to bring in their own sleep quarters. They had to provide their own feeding resources because a lot of the area didn't have any food opportunities without driving an hour plus away. They were driving up to an hour and a half to get supplies and resources that they need to do the cleanups and muckouts. And so those were all really big challenges that they had to overcome and figure out. Another one we realized that was pretty urgent early on was during the immediate disaster, the night of and the next day, the town very quickly ran out of money or places or options to get people into hotels. So we found a couple partners that were able to come in and fund the hotel and put families into hotels for a short period of time until we could find a way to get them the help they needed. I think the other thing, again, you know, as Kelsey said, we saw disaster damages all over the state. I think one of the hardest things to do is not help somebody. But one of the things you have to make, one of the choices you have to make as an entity or a group or a partner that's working to respond is you have to make choices of how many people can we help with the crews we're bringing in, and the most important decision you can make is we need to help as many as we can, and it needs to be safe, and it needs to be, you know, considerate, and you know, we need to as many people as we can. So that was really hard to not be able to send help to somebody up in Madison, Maine, that had trees on their house, or but unfortunately there were one or two that were, you know, almost 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours away from the crews we're staging, that we just couldn't find a way to get somebody there. I'll add that is still a takeaway, and we're still talking about trying to build local resources up that are able to help out individual homes and things like that, community work. So
Yeah, and
that's really
Sam,
hard.
I see there's a good example, like if you had a local CERT team that could help in those efforts, because that was a challenge, because there was always needs in different areas of the state, like I mentioned. You know, one of the things that um, I want to mention too, you know, like the housing situation, there's only one really hotel in Rumford. And then
Mhm.
you're also missed the ski season. So another area that may be close by may not be available. That was a reoccurring challenge. Let's talk a little bit. I'll go to you,
So,
Phyllis, next, but let's talk a little bit about the challenges. Because we just experienced a flood in Vermont, and I know for many that was like, okay, we had this in Vermont, we'll do this. Let's talk a little about some of the other challenges. And Phyllis, I'll go to you first.
I think just the time of year was Christmas time, and that always has an impact on who's available, which
Yeah,
volunteers are available to serve. And
yeah,
I also want to point out, like, given the example of Southern Baptist disaster relief or crisis cleanup, Maine VOAD, we do not we do not tell people their how to perform their role. Um, we coordinate things, but each VOAD member has, you know, its own way of doing things. So um, these organizations, you know, have that down, but we help coordinate it. And so I just want to make sure people understood that May VOAD is not sitting on a throne somewhere saying, you know, you do this and you do that. We highly respect each organization and their mission and their role.
I think you bring up a very good point, Phyllis, that each organization has something to bring to the table, and they have gifts and experiences and tools that really make a difference. And it comes down to timing. When's the right time to come in? Very good point. Sam and Kelsey, anything to add to that?
No, I think Phyllis said it well. I think I can recall there was one point in time where we had a brief, I say meeting, more of a conversation about, um, you know, let's make sure we try not to overcommit, and and that was based on some information that we collected. Again, that's a coordination effort. So we're not telling you or anyone that they're doing a terrible job, but we're saying, hey, we heard this, or we learned this from a group. We want to make sure we're sharing the same message, um, or getting that information out. So very much so a coordinator of information and resources.
Kelsey, anything to add?
Just echoing Phyllis, we as the state always look to local partners to just see what are you seeing, what do you need. We certainly aren't going to tell them, what they can and can't use their own resources for, or you can't do this or that. It's really their discretion. That's why they're our partners. And I think VOAD does a great job of really trying to use what they have available to them to make sure that it's a seamless support system. Always going to be challenges. Nobody ever has enough of what they need, but I know that VOAD always tries to do the best, and we certainly at the state aren't telling local entities what they need. So we really look to those partners.
Great. Well, we're kind of getting close to the end of our discussion
Bill,
today,
I
but
think we
oh,
have a
go ahead.
hand
That's a
up.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry, didn't see it. Okay, we have a hand. All right.
Hi there.
Katie, go ahead.
Yes, hey there. And I suppose, I don't know, I feel kind of like confused, I should say, I suppose, about the whole, and I missed 4 minutes. There was an issue here, and so I had to get pulled out. So I missed like 4 minutes towards the beginning, of course, but I believe this is being recorded, so I'm sure I can look back. And I know, Bill, you and I briefly talked about self-deployment and activation, rules of engagement, those sort of things. And I guess I'm wondering, why doesn't VOAD get automatically activated when there's a major statewide issue? Like if it was something similar to the effect of a Lewiston shooting or the major hurricanes, those kinds of things, so if you want to mitigate having people self-deploy or agencies, like if this is what we do, you know what I'm saying? Like why doesn't Maine VOAD get activated immediately to say, and I understand in the beginning, you don't want extra chaos and, an extra of what's happening when you're trying to figure out what's going on in the disaster, where the needs are, where the gaps are going to be. But if people are automatically activated to say, okay, for instance, for me, for the Salvation Army, if something was to happen with, say, similar to the Lewiston shooting, and I wasn't here when that happened, but I know, what some of the um, observations were in terms of on my agency's level how people responded, right? And I want to ensure that there's a proper route to be taken. And that's why I'm here now, which is good. They didn't have a director's position. So now everything can be filtered through me, right? And I reach out to my team. So there's like a level on how that goes on my end. But to reach out to all the partners and say, this is what's happening, essentially be on standby. And that way we can almost like have a report out to say, great. I know for a fact that I've got 2 teams away out of the state on vacation, but I've got 3 substantial teams that I know I could reach out to. So if you have a feeding need, I could help that. Not saying I'm the only feeding resource out there, a partnership, of course, but saying this is something I could offer, or I can help offer emotional and spiritual care, that sort of thing. So you already know what's on the plate, because I know that you know what we do, right? We talk about this in Maine VOAD,
Yeah.
and everyone knows what partners and what they can offer, but maybe just in that specific moment during that specific time, seeing where we all are, where we can meet at that time. That way, you already know what resources are readily available to you. People are on standby so they don't feel like there's a need to self-deploy or self-act or any of those kinds of things. So just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
I think I can, and Sam and Phyllis have been involved. We actually do that. We do that even pre-storm. We actually convene usually a meeting, and what we try to do is get away from this is what we did, but what are the potential needs, what resources are available. So that does happen. On the shooting situation, it's a little more complicated just because of information. But the leadership of Maine VOAD's brought in once we have information to share. That's the main trigger, and then they'll distribute. But as far as the meetings we do, that's part of the response plan. It's a good point. And that way, understand, because we had some issues, particularly in the shooting, where resources were, I would call self-invited, if that makes sense. and there were some assumptions that weren't really clarified. And then once we got to feel what was really going on, and even from a I want to call mass casualty, mass fatality. It's a little more complicated because of who's really in charge, but we do that with storms and have done it in the past. And a lot of times, actually, I think in the December storm, we did have regular meetings. We actually postponed one meeting because we felt the needs weren't there. Once we found out what was done could be done, but good point. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think so. To go on to what Bill shared too, Katie, one of the things we did too early on is we set up a VOAD call and we brought the board on and we had all the partners join and we shared what we knew and what we think we needed. Or we'll send out an email communication to the members. One thing I will share though is some of our partners are already there. And what can be helpful in that situation, let's say if a disaster occurs in one of your areas where you have a feeding site, Katie, you're automatically going to start doing feeding there. What I think it would be helpful is we would quickly say, you could reach out and say, hey, this is what we're seeing, and start communicating to us. That's a little different. That's not necessarily self-activating. That's a role that you do all the time. Where we say self-activating or self-deploying is if you were to start a massive feeding site there, that's where we try to bring in additional help or resources, or just, having the information flow freely would be beneficial in a situation like that. So it's not gray, but it is a little confusing when you start talking about some of our members are always doing this work every day. They're feeding people. We have trucks feeding people all the time. We have trucks going to Oxford County all the time. We don't really consider that self-deployment, but if I started sending 5 or extra trucks to that region, that would be kind of a little bit more along the lines of a self-deployment. It's not something we normally do. And it could create some level of confusion. So, and all I think we would do in that situation is say, hey, maybe we had some of our feeding partners directly that asked for more food support. We could coordinate that directly and we would let Maine Emergency Management know, we would let the VOAD team know that we're sending some additional trucks of food to, this location as requested by the boots on the ground, the local community people. That said, we also vet some of those requests. During one of these storms, we received a request. It was truckloads of food through a senator's office that they really wanted. And, A, somebody has to pay for that. And B, it was truckloads of food. So we reached out to the emergency management agency director in that region, and we talked to, I think I sent an email to Bill, or we communicated and said, hey, are you seeing a need for this much stuff or resources to be assigned there? And so that we got busy on digging into that, and it really wasn't urgent. It was somebody that had attempted to just say, we're going to plan for the worst case scenario. And, so it was definitely, it would have tied up a lot of resources and money. And there wasn't an urgent need per se that needed that much resources. So those are the things that we're kind of looking for.
Yeah. And Sam, I think the thing that's important to understand, and I really appreciate you, Katie, bringing the question up. The idea is that the scale is probably the big thing. If it goes to the state level, that's where Maine VOAD's automatically, they're connected right away. They get briefs, get what we know, because a lot of the work, even from a mass care, because that's my primary, and as a duty officer, they're brought in the loop as quick as possible. And then from there, they make the determination, not the state, that they're going to meet. If the leadership determines they need to have a briefing, they will do that. And again, this is something new that we've just incorporated the last couple of years. We've started that. Did that help, Katie?
Yes, I mean, it does help. I do kind of still feel like there's some gray areas in certain things, and maybe that's a conversation for like another time. And I guess like one of my concerns, I suppose, is if I'm not currently sitting on a Maine VOAD board position, so I'm not knowing right away essentially what's happening, and what if that there is a decision made that they don't need to reach out to members? Well, then that kind of excludes, it feels like, where some partners who can provide service could provide service. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I feel like everyone has
Yeah,
logical reasoning for things, but you know.
I think if it reaches states where VOAD partners are going to need to be informed, that's what the leadership will do. They do that. And again, being on the board has no, when you are on the board doesn't represent their own agency. They report, they're really an umbrella for the entire VOAD. But if it's done right, and I think it's gotten better over time, where it's okay, people need to know, and that's why we incorporate those meetings. It's open to everybody. We have National VOAD involved as they're part of it, regional, and even FEMA. So that's taken care of. There's a point, and again, a lot of it is when there's information to share, we may not know. And even like the December storm, one of the challenges we had, we really didn't know the severity till the next day. Between the road issues and access and everything, it made it really difficult. But I can tell you, once we know, we have a good idea what's going on. And even with the shooting, nobody really knew what was going on till the next day. So
Sure.
I hope that helped. Phyllis, do you have anything to add?
No, I think I understand Katie's feeling of confusion. And hopefully, once you see us a bit more and hear us a bit more, you may feel more comfortable um, with how we communicate with our members. Because
Yeah.
it's not just the board
No.
being privy to stuff. Our immediate response is to turn around to our members and start communicating and getting that situational awareness information to you so you can make decisions as well.
And the other thing is keep in mind is, Maine VOAD isn't an automatic thing. And if they're not requested by the local or county, nothing happens, but they are brought in very early once even the state knows. The other thing I think is important to understand, one of the challenges we did have in December was once certain organizations go into community, nobody really knew what they were doing. So that kind of made it really tough. There was some duplication of efforts and lack of coordination made it very challenging. So I think to your point, again, I think the system's in place to help with this. And it's worked. I think it's worked more effectively in our December storms than I've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, another thing that you'll see us do too, when there's a very active situation or a big disaster going on, we'll send out communications and we'll BCC the membership. We do that to avoid people replying to all because we know that communications really start happening and people start, sharing small things and it gets pretty crazy if, 100 and something people on our communication list start getting reply alls from, certain members. It does really fill up inboxes and details get mixed. But one example, when the active shooter thing occurred, the very next day we met as a board that morning, and then we put together a communication, and we basically said we're actively monitoring the shooter situation in Lewiston that began. We said this is still a very active scene. We will continue to provide updates as we had them, and then I believe the next day we sent another update saying, "Hey, here's what we know." I think we requested in that particular situation, we requested folks that could do remote spiritual and emotional care because there were so many people still sheltering in place. So we started working behind the scenes with some of our members, and they had we have a list of the ones that do certain tasks. I think we reached specifically out to 2 of those groups, but that's just one example. And I think it worked pretty well. We found some resources without too much effort, and then we assigned work to those resources. But as Bill shared, every situation seems to be different, and sometimes we learn from these situations, and it's not an easy feat. But all we ask is that storms no longer happen during holidays, and it'll make it easier for us.
Appreciate the question, Katie, though.
Yeah, it's a great question, Katie.
Anybody else, any
Thank
other
you.
questions before we go on a little bit quick here? All right, now last question. Let's talk about takeaways, the lesson learned. And I know Sam, Kelsey, and I and Phyllis have talked a lot about what what would be different or what could be done different. And, and we know that it would call the disaster calls really work really well because it kind of keep people abreast. And again, ongoing information from vetted sources is really critical. So let's talk about, the lessons learned, particularly in the storms.
Phyllis, you want to go?
I'm sorry, I keep getting disconnected. I think it just goes back to the, the collaboration and communication part. And, unfortunately, those are the situations where, as Sam said earlier, that's where we identify and meet new VOAD members and what they've brought.
Yeah, one of the things, once we realized how much data was coming in, I quickly knew we had to find a way to organize it and share it. And in my travels, I had learned about a resource called Crisis Cleanup. And I think I made like a 7 p.m. phone call, and he answered his phone and said, "Yes, we will help you." And they set up an account. They set up all kinds of things for us. They sent me all the information I needed to have a very simple learning document that anybody could just, a couple of videos, you just watch that. I think it was like 2 minutes long on how to use the software, and then boom, I was in. And we were able to start organizing data and talking about data. I didn't do that by myself. I asked the board what we thought was the most appropriate method, and we all agreed that it was pretty much necessary to try to organize this a little bit better, and that we were going to probably bring in some assistance to help out with some of these community members. So, and then very, very similar in time frame, right around the same time, we received a request from Oxford County, and that just solidified that we were already heading in the right direction. And then it became about finding more volunteers. I think a takeaway is the state of Maine is just very much so not, we don't have as many volunteers as we used to have. So in the spur of the moment, it was really hard to find anyone, even members that could answer phone calls. We had to reach out nationally to find some folks that could answer phone calls. So that was definitely a challenge or a lesson. And then I said earlier, building more capacity in the local communities that can help out smaller disasters, a smaller road flooding, a tree on a house, or things like that in smaller quantities is in everybody's best interest. And so income cert teams and things like that, we really want to promote that and continue promoting that work. So there's a plug for cert. That definitely is the biggest lesson there, I think.
And CERT is the is Community Emergency Response Team.
And, and I think, just echo what you guys are saying. The one thing we know is that for historical context, for those that are fairly new or haven't been involved with VOAD, I think you have to understand that Maine hasn't had anything really to draw our attention to as far as storms. We're the last year seen an unprecedented number. That used to be not the case. COVID was our last big, about 2017, we had a storm, but we haven't had a lot. So one of the challenges that's really hard, particularly when we deal with even national VOAD, they're used to going in areas with a lot of resources, but one of the challenges, and we even saw with Southern Baptist, what challenge they had is like flights getting people in because of it's not easy getting into Maine, particularly in the winter. I think what often people, even in northern New England, is, we're 35,000 square miles. And many of our areas are very rural and remote. So it does complicate things a little better. Ties into the availability of volunteers. Maine right now has over 20% of Maine residents are 65 and over, predicted to get to 30% in 2026, or excuse me, 2030. So it does complicate things a little bit. And it does, not having it. And I, even what Katie shared there about posturing, that's one thing we've tried to improve is posture. We have one organization, we've made a lot of progress on posturing properly that, we ask people, what's your resources available? When I think even like the Red Cross, they use a 168-hour timeline. I pretty much know on a hurricane what resources they have. Even when we know weather's going to potentially occur, we even reach out to know, hey, what resources people are available. And as Sam mentioned, our holidays have really complicated things. That was a challenge in the December storms because there were so many people out of state and on vacation. Kelsey, anything to add?
Yeah, I think, it in an interesting way, this got a lot of people kind of more interested in this type of response and this area. It, as you mentioned, it had been such a long time since we've had a disaster like this on the scale where we were even able to get an individual assistance declaration. So, we are trying to sort of capture everyone's attention. And I think that just creates a lot more opportunity for us to make better connections and create some better networks and recruiting of interesting people that could definitely make a difference in these situations.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. One thing I know Phyllis and Kelsey and I and Sam have talked about, even the idea of Maine VOAD has will offer during a situation like this, particularly in an impacted county, to actually stage somebody in their EOC if requested. So there are new opportunities that haven't occurred in the past that are starting to occur. So with that, any questions from anybody? I know we have Nikki, who has been involved for quite a while now. Anybody any closing thoughts or comments or questions?
Hey, this is Nikki from 211. I just want to echo what everyone said. This has been really helpful. And, unfortunately, weather events I feel like over the last few years, they seem to always happen around holidays too. It'd be great if we could plan those better. But, having this, the open communication in this group to me is like the best part of being involved in Maine VOAD and knowing about it. So if you have questions, I just encourage people to reach out to any one of us, especially Sam and Phyllis and Bill. Like, they're always open to have these conversations. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Nikki. Anybody else? Well, I want to thank everyone for their time today. I had a really good opportunity to kind of share, and there are some great opportunities ahead and continued collaborative. One thing that's going to happen in Tinley in March, which some of you will be contacted to participate, we're actually going to do a shelter exercise, which we haven't done in our state in quite some time. So I'm pretty excited. Maine VOAD will be involved. Some of the partners will be involved as well. And I'll actually be creating a work group once we get the date confirmed. But there are opportunities, again, the more we do before, that's why we've incorporated these trainings to get people working together. Understanding the uniqueness of our state. I've worked in other states, and Maine is very unique in a lot of ways. It's really resilient, but also too, we're finding a new normal that we haven't experienced. And again, the more we prepare, the more effective we can be. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Sam, Phyllis, and Kelsey, for your contributions and everybody's time today. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.